Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. In the wake of the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, along with the palpable distrust of police in the African-American community, many law enforcement agencies across the country have hired African-American police chiefs. The goal, diversifying leadership and changing culture from within. But what happens when these top cops get pushback from the rank and file and from the Black community? Up next on Another View, a candid conversation with former Norfolk Police Chief Larry Boone on being Black and blue. That's next on Another View, right after this news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. A very special thank you to those of you who came out for our Juneteenth celebration last week and had lunch with us. It was a grand time. And also want to welcome two interns that we have working with us this summer here at Another View. Miss Lydia Winstead. She's a rising junior in Princess Anne High School, and she's already studying journalism, so we're starting them out early. I love it. Absolutely. And then Alice Cox, she just graduated from Norfolk Collegiate and is on her way to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. So welcome, ladies, and we will put you to work this summer, no doubt about it. So he's the former police chief for the Norfolk Police Department, and now he's the newly named chief of police in Urbana, Illinois, and he's here with his final interview before leaving Hampton Roads. Please welcome Chief Larry Boone. Hey, Larry, how are you?
Hey, Barbara, I'm great. I'm great.
So, congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about who you're going to be policing in Urbana.
So, Urbana is a very, very progressive county. When I first retired from Norfolk, I took about 6 months off before I decided to do anything. And I started applying to larger agencies. And I had a couple of gentlemen working with me to strategically locate me in certain localities. And much of that is in the news. The challenge is, though, or was, I should say, as it became apparent that I might be the next chief in these cities, I call it character assassination, was occurring in the backdrop. And
so nothing people brought out publicly, but things were happening behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. Some of the craziest things I heard was, your championship rings are intimidating. Or you sound
from football
when you
played in college.
Yes.
Okay.
In this particular county, they ended up hiring a guy that, one, had been sued twice for excessive force. And while using excessive force, he used the N-word and several other racial slurs.
But that's who they hired.
That's the guy they hired. And anything I'm saying is for public consumption.
Yeah.
But I wore championship rings and I sounded too much like Obama. I got a million stories I can share with you. So here's the deal. So the two headhunters that I had been working with, one of them was a white guy, one's a black guy. He said, look, no urban city is going to hire you because most of the cities you're applying to, you're always going to be in the room and you're always going to be a finalist. But that mayor or that city manager, they will have to have a lot of moxie to be in your space. This is going to sound somewhat
well, but the politics of it is real, and you have a big personality, and that's what they're saying.
That's the term
is that right?
they use. Okay, It's funny you say that. One particular place I was interviewing with, and this is online, you can see the difference. One of the headhunters came to me. He said, look, they're concerned about your personality. You have a big personality. The community likes it. Some city council members like it, but the officers may be somewhat concerned about it. Could you tone it down? So this particular event, I didn't perform well. I was kind of somewhat subdued. And after the event, the community members that had seen me perform early on during the process, they said, who the hell was that? And I said, well, I'm confused because I was just told that you guys said I needed to tone it down a little bit. I'll just name the location, Cincinnati. There's 2 videos. One video, you'll see it. I'm somewhat subdued. The second video, I'm Larry Boone.
You're being Larry.
Yeah.
And I mean, you shouldn't have to change who you are in order to fit a mold, someone else's mold. But you have to also look at what's the best fit for you and the community. And so apparently Urbana is super excited about you coming.
I landed in the best spot for me. They were not on my radar. One of the headhunters said, look, Larry, I've been following you for years. The way you lead, the things you believe in with respect to police reform, they are starving for that. And I'm telling you, when I arrived, I saw a lot of symbolic stuff that said they're for real. I can't tell you how many churches I saw with Black Lives Matter signs or LGBTQ plus or Asian kids wearing President Obama shirts and the community wearing back to blue shirts, but at the same time they embrace me. You know, that hadn't always been my narrative in some places. They just want someone that's going to be progressive, that's going to back the officers when the officers are right, hold the officers accountable, and bridge that gap between community and law enforcement. And lastly, I have a mayor, in Urbana. She doesn't care how much spotlight I get. She wants me to be out front. As a matter of fact, she wants you to be out front.
That's a good thing. Absolutely. So you and I have been talking back and forth a little bit on text and just kind of looking at policing in general and particularly the role that African-American police chiefs play in terms of making a difference, in terms of reform within the community, within the department, as well as recreating trust within the community. And there was an article in USA Today, Black Chiefs Pushing Police Reform Face Racism, Anger from Officers and Their Communities. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about when you became police chief. Which side did you decide to tackle first? Or did you have to balance them both?
So that's an awesome question. Because I came from within, I relied on my relationships that I had built over 30 plus years, that my officers knew who I was. So my intensity was focused with the community, which is why we were so heavy towards community relations. That became a handicap after George Floyd. And I say that because I had conducted myself in such a fashion I was going to be transparent. I was going to level the playing field, so to speak, and I was going to be accessible to the community. So 3 prongs. Number 1, after George Floyd, the activity with Black Lives Matter, me marching with them, I knew that would be problematic. Number 2, I did a lot of first in the Norfolk Police Department. Too many to name right now, but for an example, the very first African-American female assistant chief to level the playing field. Did a lot of firsts. I knew that would be problematic. I had one particular promotion. I think it was my last promotional ceremony. I had a lot of diversity in some very powerful positions. And lastly, having to make a discipline decision that required me to terminate a lieutenant. I knew my days were numbered because in any organization, you have 60% that's going to do the mission. You have another 20% that are just I don't care one way or the other. Then you have that other 20% that's going to be the squeaky wheel, that's going to get the attention of city council, that's going to galvanize to get rid of you. And I saw that formulating.
So you saw it coming.
Absolutely.
So when you decided to march in Black Lives Matter protest, talk to me about your thought process, knowing you're the police chief, knowing it could cause issues, but you marched anyway. And I think a lot of our listeners would love to know, what were you thinking about? Why was that important to you?
Well, up until then, Bar, we had several protest marches, and I've never participated in any of them. But this particular one, there was intel that they were going to destroy one of our police precincts. And that was the main reason I showed up. But then we got intel that they were going to storm the precinct. And inside the precinct, I had dispatchers, I had officers, but I also had my crowd management team inside that precinct. We only had about 60 officers compared to 500 people. We were severely outnumbered. So I didn't want to create that illusion where I have a row of officers lined up and the citizens facing the officers. I didn't want to memorialize that optic because that says offense, defense, and something's going to happen. So I instructed them to stay inside the building. And I went and stood in front of the building. I was not concerned for my life or anything like that. I relied upon the relationships we had built over the course of the years. And now it was heated, but my main goal was this. I did not want anyone in the precinct getting injured. I didn't want the protesters getting injured. I thought that my best option was to calm them down, which I did. And they wanted me to march with them, which I did, but I knew I was going to get severe pushback, and I did. But ultimately, nobody got arrested. There was no property damage, and I had some work to do to try to rebuild my relationship with my officers because they did not like it. They flat out did not like it. And go ahead.
When I became news director at the one of the stations here in town back in the 90s, and I was the only African-American female news director in the top 50 markets at that time. And I got a lot of pushback from staff who would say to me, well, why are we doing that story? It's only because you're Black. Is that the kind of pushback or some of the kind of pushback that you may have gotten from officers when you would try to implement reform?
In any police department, particularly for a Black chief, because we intersect both parties, the Black community and law enforcement, race always comes up. Promotions and discipline, always. And when you are leaning too heavy towards community relations and requiring your officers to do things they're not comfortable in doing, you're going to get pushed back. I remember, because I had some dynamite officers that were willing to do just that. And I recall one particular officer, white sergeant now, that I promoted twice. There were some things I required you to do for promotion. And he came to me almost in tears. He said, Chief, I want to do what's right. I want to embrace your vision. But I just had a sergeant say, why are you following Chief Boone's mission with these kids? They're nothing but future felons.
How do you change that kind of attitude when you're working from the inside? Because, people tell us all the time, get in the inside, become a leader within the inside, make change from the inside. How do you change that kind of attitude?
I think it's easy if you're from the inside, okay? Like I said previously, I came from the inside, and everybody knew rather, I didn't care who you were. If you stepped out of the line, I was going to hold you responsible. And you do it by, one, giving that individual, an opportunity to be heard, okay? Let's say that particular sergeant. Giving them an opportunity to be heard. And in addition to that, you have to hold them accountable for everyone to see. I played no favors, black or white. Now, what I did have to do at times, if a minority officer was seeking discipline, sometimes recommendations were too heavy. And I knew this based on my history in the department. Well, Officer Johnson's getting 2 days suspension for X, while Officer Smith only got a letter of reprimand. Let's level the playing field, because this is what we did for the white officer. We're going to do the same thing for the black officer. Barbara, I will tell you, and any African-American chief will understand this, it is highly draining. Every decision, every little thing you do is couched in, okay, did I come off playing favors? Did I come off? For an example, if I walked into a room and that room was diverse, and I see someone to my left that I grew up on the department with that's African American. I see some folks on my right, they may have 2 years on the department. I shouldn't have to walk in a room and say, "Dag, if I shake his hand first." You know where I was going.
Yes.
But it happened. It's just draining.
That is something that our white brothers and sisters do not understand, that we deal with every single day. When I go into an event or whatever, you are constantly thinking, okay, how is this going to play? You know, if I speak to this person first, is it going to make this person upset? I mean, it is this whole dynamic that they don't have to deal with, quite frankly.
And I could tell by the way you were nodding your head in agreement where I was going, because it's just draining. You know,
it is absolutely
I would
draining.
pull up to work or pull up to an event and just, okay, let me put on my coat suit. Okay.
Absolutely.
It just wears you out.
Absolutely. It does. So when you have moments like that, and when you're facing issues, you know, I know you're a member of NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. There are other black chiefs. I'm sure you guys talk amongst yourselves. What are some of the things that you all do to support each other, or to help you kind of get through that moment?
Excellent question. We talk. Okay, we talk a lot. And one of the things we do, particularly when we're seeking employment, we kind of get intel from each other. We will have some folk that may be in that particular city or an adjacent city and say, well, tell me, you know, what's the background on this? For an example, you know, I was a finalist for Fort Myers. I pulled out at the last second for a reason. And that was based on information I received from NOBLE. Okay. All right. And ultimately took the Urbana job. There's a lot of politics, as we all know, that goes into the police chief position. It's a powerful position. It's an out front position. And I fortunately landed where I could be me.
Do all police chiefs come through the ranks? I mean, in other words, to reach that position, you have to have gone through the ranks of being a police officer? For
the most part, yes. There are some agencies that, well, you know, you go from sergeant to chief, you know, a little tiny department. But for your larger agencies, you're going to have to go up through the ranks.
So in other words, they would not bring in an outsider to look at the police without police experience, in other words.
Well, that
actual
happens.
Policing experience.
That happens. You're talking about policing experience or supervisory experience?
Both.
Yeah, you got to have some supervisory experience. They wouldn't bring in, you know, someone that has no police experience to look at or look over a police department. That wouldn't make any sense, but I'm sure it has happened somewhere.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking with former Norfolk Police Chief, now Urbana, Illinois Police Chief, Larry Boone. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We got an email from a Ms. Carter, as she signed her email. email, and she had several questions for you, but I just wanted to pull one out, which I thought was an interesting question. She says, if you could go back and change one thing or one decision that you had to make as an African-American chief of police, what would it be, if any?
One thing that I could do over.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I constantly think about is how could we have made the city safer? And I had some ideas. Mm-hmm. Number one, bring in an outside source to teach us how to do violent crime interruption, the Newark model. Number two, strategically place cameras in some of our most violent neighborhoods, but also have the community have input as to how the implementation goes. I tried to do that in 2019 and was met with resistance.
From the community or from management? From government?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're doing it now.
Yeah.
And we're only doing it now because of the two incidents that occurred downtown.
Well, since you mentioned downtown, there is this feeling particularly in the Black community, that if it happens anywhere other than their community, that there's more attention paid to it. So in other words, you have two incidents where people were killed in downtown Norfolk. All of a sudden we had cameras. All of a sudden we had people on the street walking the streets. You got more bicycle units. You got all this stuff happening, where in the predominantly African-American communities, you have a lot of killings and shootings and maimings and so forth. And the perception is there's not the same amount of attention paid there.
So I'm going to flip that question, and I will say this to our listeners. For years, I highlighted gun violence. For years, I said the last 30 years, there have been 1,000 homicides. And out of that 1,000, 900 plus had been mainly African-American men. Not a peep from the community. Not one peep. And I fully kept marching and saying that and beating that drum to galvanize some form of activity to address the issue collectively.
You were the first one, as a matter of fact, I think it was here on our show when you talked about it being a public health crisis before the public health departments started calling gun violence a public health crisis.
That's correct. And I just could not get folks to galvanize. I mean, I just don't understand it. Now, to answer your question, I understand why cities do that. That's just, something cities do to they protect their investment. It's not something unique to Norfolk. That happens in all major cities. I've just spent a lot of time in Chicago here recently, and, they're having some of the issues downtown that we've had in Norfolk, and they're doing the same thing. Cities are going to protect where their revenue comes from. That's just the reality of life in any urban city. So.
And that's the politics that have to be played, right? 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Let's talk to Michael in Virginia Beach. Hi, Michael. You're in the air.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call today. And this is a great conversation. My wife and I are very active in various reform programs. It's great to hear this insider's perspective. You guys just mentioned, though, that when you enter a racially diverse room, that white people don't have to deal with the same type of, who do I say hi to first, who do I shake hands to. Having spent the last 4 decades affiliated with the military, it's the exact same thing. It's just from a different perspective, a different life experience. But I walk through a room. Do I shake the hands of the African American personnel first, or the Asian people, but my white friend that I grew up with is on the other side of the room, and I always go to the most racially diverse people when I enter the room to try to set everybody at ease or try to level the playing field. So, granted, it comes from a different cultural background, but I think it is very much the same. Thank you.
I appreciate that call, Michael, and it sounds like you are very progressive. Because at least in my experience, that is not how it works. But I'll let you respond, Larry.
No, he brings up a good point.
Yeah. Plus, with the military too, I think it also has a different.
Right, but here's the thing. Okay, for an African American chief, those things start to tally up. So you have a sergeant say, "Yeah, I went to a function today," and the chief went to the black side of the room. He says this in roll call. Okay, you got young officers starting to hear this, and they start developing their own narrative, and then they may be in a room, and I go greet the most senior person who may be African American. Then that narrative starts to build. It's just draining. It's just the nonsense, and I know for a fact I have African American chiefs listening to me, and they are applauding because they're saying the things they can't say. Now, I'm not saying a white chief don't have the same challenges. They certainly do have challenges, but as an African American, you live in both worlds, and a world where law enforcement hadn't always been professional to African Americans, and you live in that world of law enforcement, and you're just trying to navigate yourself through both worlds.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the challenges facing African American leadership in law enforcement with Chief Larry Boone, the former leader of Norfolk Police Department and now the new chief with the Urbana, Illinois Police Department. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. You had a run-in with law enforcement as a young person.
Yes.
There are several other chiefs who have had in their younger years run-in with the police, but yet you still decided to go into law enforcement. Why?
I'll tell you, for me, I did not like the police, only because of the actions I saw them do as a younger man. My senior year in college, I saw for the first time in my life, I'm 21, 22, whatever you are as a senior in college, an African-American police officer.
For the first time?
First time in my life.
Wow.
And he was put together. He looked like a superhero. And you could tell he liked himself. All right. And when I saw him, I said, that's what I want to do.
So it overshadowed what had happened to you in the past.
Well, again, Barbara, it's like I didn't think we could do that. Okay, you often heard me say, "The me I see is the me I'll be." So when I saw that, I always wanted to do something that required me to wear a uniform once I finished college. But when I saw him, I said, wow, if he can do it, I can do it. Now, when I showed up to Norfolk at the old arena, they had 40 positions for 700 people. So then that mindset that we tend to have started creeping in. I'm not going to get one of these positions, but I did.
And you took it from there.
I took it from there.
Let's talk to, I think the name is Simeon from Norfolk. Hi, Simeon. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you for having me on. I just wanted to make this comment. Chief Boone, I was a part of the Life Enrichment Center, the LEC, and Chief Boone brought together his officers in the LEC to provide reading tutelage to kids in Title I schools and to build community or familiarity with the police department and young men and young ladies in the community. And I always admired that he did that. I got a chance to meet some nice officers because of him putting that in place. And I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that call. You want to respond?
Thank you, Simeon. And thank you for highlighting that. That was one of our signature programs. And like I said, I couldn't have done it without the support of the women and men of the Norfolk Police Department. And that's one program I will take to Urbana.
What else will you take with you?
Well, I created a whole lot, Barbara, so I'm entitled to take the whole bucket.
But is there a major issue that Urbana is facing that you're aware of?
One of the things that sticks out in my mind, some of the things we do here in Norfolk, And Norfolk's a fantastic police department. We're progressive, we're innovative depending on who's in that seat, right? And a lot of states aren't doing some of the things we're doing.
Wow.
Shockingly, just in conversation with some of the community members in Urbana, I'm talking about things we take for granted here.
Give me an example.
The reading program,
Wow.
the chess program, the clergy program.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I mean, just multitude of things, having an MLK march,
Wow.
The fact that if I go somewhere, I want my command staff there with me, and they're excited.
And there are people who are sitting back going, but that's not policing. Policing is pull up on the bad guys and lock people up.
Well, those days are gone by the way of the dodo bird. Okay. Now, there are folks that need to go to jail. Okay, we know that. But we also know that if you start building those relationships, those authentic relationships with community members, they're going to call you. They're going to talk to you. You're going to be able to solve crime much faster than you ever would, because the reality of it is 9 times out of 10, we solve crimes through somebody talking to us.
Yeah.
Okay, we're some talented people, but we need the help of the community, and they're not going to help you if they don't trust you.
When you are a black police chief and a George Floyd happens, or a Breonna Taylor happens, or anything of that magnitude, and you go to the black community and you're trying to help calm people down, like you were talking about, how do you mitigate the anger? Because there's a long history, unfortunately,
yes,
of that distrust, that every time you think you're starting to make a change, something happens, and then you got to start all over again.
That's an excellent question. I got an excellent example for it. So when I went into that sea of protesters, they were peppering me with all kind of questions. And in that moment, I knew to tell it like it was. Okay, I wasn't going to try to, we got to wait and, for the investigation. And once the investigation is over, we render, all that nonsense. So I had a couple kids said, was George Floyd murdered? I said, absolutely. They didn't expect me to say that. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what I've found in those situations, you got to be vulnerable, make yourself vulnerable. Okay. And very transparent. It works every time. In Urbana, I was getting peppered with questions where they thought, or they had been used to, someone ducking and dodging and saying that, circle the wagon type of response. Mm-hmm. That's not who I am. I speak with big teeth, and they appreciated that.
And then what did your police officers think about that?
They absolutely loved it. I was speaking to a crowd, and I know when I'm speaking to a crowd, I got to touch the concerns of the officers, the concerns of the community, and the concerns of government. And after speaking to this particular crowd, I saw several people wearing a black T-shirt, back to blue, thin blue line, and my biases kicked in. Okay, and as I walked by them, I was expecting, the dirty look, and this white woman grabbed me by the hand. I didn't know who she was at the time, and she looked me right in my eyes. She said, I appreciate everything you said, because you told the truth regarding all 3 entities, and that's what we need. I later learned that her son is a police officer with the Urbana Police Department. Mm-hmm. I wasn't used to that. That totally surprised me.
All right. Let's go to Robert in Williamsburg. Hi, Robert. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening, it was interesting, but just wanted to cover something. This pressure, the being worn out, making sure you're doing it, not showing prejudice, doing the right thing, affects the white folks too. I was a manager in Fredericksburg, and before you did any promotions, there's a reprimand, if there's progress report, first thing you do is check your own house. Make sure it's not you. Make sure you're not leaning one way or the other. Depending on how you're raised or what you did, you may have your own headset. So first, make sure your house is right. Then make sure how it's going to appear. So it's tough. Management, period, it's tough. You got to make sure that, again, there's no prejudice you bring with you, and to make sure that it's going to look fair to the rest of the folks. So it is. Every time there's a promotion, every time there's a review, you got to do the same dance.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Robert. Thanks so much for the call. We appreciate that. And we're not saying there is a management style and there is what things that you have to do as a manager. I think it is hard for people who are not people of color to understand that there's an extra layer on top of that. I don't know. Would you agree?
I certainly agree with that, and no disrespect for the last caller. And what he said is true. But here's the reality, and I'm speaking as a black law enforcement police chief, where you work in an urban city and you rely upon your conservative workforce in order to make this machinery work. What cities are facing now is this. If you hire this guy as your chief, we're going to leave. And the bulk of any police department, is Caucasian.
Yeah, across the country.
Across the country.
Yes.
Here in Virginia, there's 23,000 law enforcement officers. Only about 800 are African American or minority.
Wow.
And people don't know that. Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that small.
Yeah.
I thought I knew that there was a small number, but
so every decision you make, is I don't want to upset the majority because we have to function. So again, here's the blueprint that cities are facing, because I faced it in a couple cities where I was a finalist. If you hire this guy because he's progressive, we are already short. You're going to lose 30, 40 more people. Then as a mayor, city manager, you're like, I can't afford to do that. I got to find a way to go on to the next candidate. So those are the things that, I've dealt with.
So why would someone want to become a police officer today?
That's a good question. And there are folks that want to do this reform thing. There are young kids that want to do this reform thing. They want to join the profession for the right reasons to make a change. 20 years ago, you were here. The recruits say, I want to help people. Half of them was full of garbage. They listened to their uncle or somebody come home and say, yeah, I ran down this guy tonight on foot pursuit or did this. I know this because I've heard it. But the majority, and I need to underscore this, the majority of every law enforcement department, people's hearts are in the right place. It really is. I'll go to my grave saying that. But I also know this because I spent a good time in internal affairs. You got folks wearing that badge that should not be wearing that badge. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
And they should not do that. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. L joins us from Smithfield.
Yes. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hi. How are you?
I'm there. I can't complain. I'm alive. I'm living in the land of the living.
Okay. What's your question?
I really don't have a question. I just wanted to congratulate and commend Chief Boone. I actually met him personally with my wife. She was at Camp Estella one day, and she was visiting her sister, and a young male ended up breaking into her car and taking her purse, and her sister chased the guy down and got her purse back, and Chief commended my wife with an award. And she still holds this award to this day, and it's actually framed up on the wall. But I just want to commend him. I totally understand where both of you are coming, because I think we have to really look at real history and not his story. You know what I mean? Because his story, the etymology of the word, is history. We have to look at real history and not his version of the story. But Chief is doing an excellent job. I understand the different challenges that he faces. And as long as we teach our young folk and hold dearly that we are the light, and many things come to the light. Bad things come to the light to take advantage of the light, as well as good things come to the light. And the light outshines the darkness. So I commend you, Chief. Keep your head up high. Just remember you're the light and the salt of the earth, and everybody will be held responsible with for their action.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the call.
Thank you for saying that.
That is fantastic. But one more I need to tell you. This is from Dr. Keith Newby, who sent me a text, and he said, I am up in New York for my birthday. Today is his birthday. Happy birthday, Keith. For a couple of days. If you could pass on to Larry Boone on the air that I send my regards and well wishes, and am truly saddened as to his departure. But I am fully aware that the citizens of Urbana are blessed to have someone of his skills, caliber, and dedication making sure they remain safe.
Thank you, brother.
So I just wanted you to
Dr.
know
Newby.
that Dr. Newby had that to say also. So we had another question that came to us, and that is, what was the greatest challenge you faced as an African-American chief of police in Norfolk, and how did you feel about working under management, city management, that from her perspective seemed to be jealous of your success, they said? This is Ms. Carter's question, not I'm not saying that that's what happened.
I let me just frame this way. I've heard that many times, particularly in the last 2 years of my tenure. I worked for two city managers. One, Doug Smith, straight shooter, dynamite guy, and the other, Dr. Filer. Mm-hmm. And to some degree, the mayor. I would say this. Both city managers would say to me, I don't understand your relationship between you and the mayor. And I was always perplexed by that. Because when I pushed them, they would always divert and say, never mind. And they said it multiple times. Mm-hmm. And at some point, folks would come to me and they would tell me the mayor feels a certain kind of way about you. And I know what I'm saying right now is causing emotions, but it's the truth. Citizens of Norfolk would come to me and say the mayor feels a certain kind of way about you. And in fact, they said he was a bit envious because my face became the
because
face
you
of
were
the city.
out in front of the city?
Yeah.
Did you have conversation with him about that?
I did. I confronted the mayor about 4 months ago at an event where he had made a call to another mayor in another city. That mayor did not appreciate that call. That mayor called me to let me know the conversation.
So it's the politics and managing the politics, which is something that a lot of times, since there are so few African-American leaders at that level, that sometimes you don't get the training or the wherewithal to learn how to deal with that. So how do you manage the politics?
One, I do what I'm charged with doing. If someone has a problem with how I'm doing it, and if I'm stepping out of bounds, it's up to them to correct me. Now, I like your pivot, but I'm getting back to what I was talking about.
Well, I mean, but the problem is because I don't have the mayor here to also.
No, I was going to say, I was
Okay.
going. In all reality, the mayor gave me a shot, and I will always appreciate him for that. Okay. So I'm going to just close it at that. But in terms of managing politicians, Barbara, I'm going to, in the words of Sinatra, I'm going to do it my way. And in my way will always be by policy.
So you think of being police chief as not being political, being a political person?
It is political, but I don't play it. It is a political position, but I don't play the politics because you get trapped in all kind of minutia that you just cannot work your way out of.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that when you talk to fellow leaders through Noble and other organizations, is that pretty much how particularly black police chiefs feel, that they don't play the politics? Or does it depend on where they are in the country?
It depends on where they are, and it depends on the individual. You have some chiefs that just don't want to create any narratives or any concerns, and they just
want to go along to get along.
Yeah, and you've seen them, okay, and everybody recognizes that when you try to do the right thing for folks and you stand up for folks that typically aren't heard, your days are numbered, and I'm fine with that. If I don't wear another uniform today, I'm fine with that.
So as long as you can feel good about yourself at the end of the day, that you've done the best job that you can.
Absolutely.
do. Let's talk to Robert in Norfolk. Hi, Robert. You're on the air.
Hey, Barbara. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it very much. You know me as I go by Butch.
Oh,
anyway,
hey.
Chief, hey, how are you?
Good.
Chief, hey, thanks so much for your service. I got a question for you, and it's this. What advice or guidance might you offer your successor on the issue of civilian oversight of police? Norfolk has drug its feet inexcusably and in a very untransparent manner, in my view. And I would like to know what you would offer him in terms of, integrating civilian oversight as an element of community policing. Thanks, Barbara.
Okay, thanks, Butch.
That's a good question. I think, civilian oversight, it's coming to a theater near you. There's no way around it. From what I understand about Chief Talbert, he does have experience in managing that piece of policy. He's a smart guy. My piece of advice would be to ensure that he's at the table, but more importantly, to ensure that you center the community around this policy-making piece of legislation, that they have a real say in that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to discipline, that should be with the chief of police, because they have the experience in knowing the type of discipline and in terms of how long and et cetera one should be disciplined for. Citizens tend not to have that type of information.
Let me ask you a question. Do we do a disservice, and I'm talking about African-American children right now, should we teach them about officer friendly, or should we teach them about officer reality, if you will, in terms of helping our children to grow up, to restore trust, what's the way we should teach them about interactions with police today?
Yeah, I think that you should teach them about both, because both do exist. But at the same time, the teaching or the modeling should come from the police department. Okay, they should take the lead in buttressing whatever it is you may be telling your child, whether you're saying most officers are officer friendly or the other way around. The police department should be driving that, which is why community engagement is so important. And you as a leader has to ensure that most of your officers embrace that as well. Good question. The reality of it is most cops are good cops, but you will run into that cop that, as I said previously, should not wear that badge.
Well, but in particular communities also, particularly poor communities, they tend to not see officer friendly as much as they see officer enforcement. Let's call it that way.
Let me give you an example. The gentleman talked about the reading program. For the first time, a lot of those kids were seeing an officer in a different light. Okay, they're used to these officers going into those communities, whether it's a domestic or shooting, whatever the case may be. For the first time, they are introduced to an officer, and 9 times out of 10, or 8 times out of 10, that officer's white, teaching them how to read. And trust me, Barbara, when I say this, at the end of that school year, there is a real relationship. I'm talking about tears from the officers, tears from the kids. This officer has an opportunity to see some child from a community that he or she may patrol in a different light. He's just like my child, or he or she just like my nephew. And this child sees this officer in a different light other than responding to a domestic or whatever the case may be, which is why that program was so important.
So I know we start with the children, but what do you say to the adult who comes at you and says, you know what, you can stand there, Mr. Chief, but we know the reality?
You still got to work with them. As a young man, everybody knows that he walks around with his flag and his bullhorn, and he gave me hell. Okay, and I don't mind. Okay, I'd rather folks give me that kind of energy than not be in a position to speak to me, because I made myself available to everyone. I think that's important. Folks that support you, that's good, but the folks that don't support you, you need to have them at the table as well, because you just can't give up on them. You have to continuously try to work with them, because at some point they may see a glimmer of your truth or of your department's truth. And to me, that's worth it.
So is this your last stop, Urbana? Before you retire for real?
I think, my plan is to be there 2, 3, 4 years and do something with the NFL regarding security. I'm starting to, work myself into that arena. And that would be my last stop.
Wow. So in the last 2 minutes that we have, what advice would you give to people in terms of any interaction that they may have with police? In other words, if you're about to have an interaction with a police officer, should you breathe? Should you change, what should be your mindset as you go into that? Because it's on both sides that we're trying to get people to treat each other well.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's an article that came out a couple of weeks ago regarding the first 45 seconds. And the first 45 seconds kind of indicated how this consensual stop was going to go. If the officer was hyped, it was going to go bad. If the citizen obviously was hyped, it was going to go bad. So one of the things we did or still do in Norfolk is procedural justice, where we give folks an opportunity to be heard. We tell them why we stopped them. Most folks want to know right away, why am I stopping? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Tell them why you're stopping them. There used to be a time, early on in my career, you just didn't do that. And people expected that. But now, with all the video and things of nature out here, people are concerned about the stop. So you need to tell them why you're stopping them. And at the same time, folks, if an officer is giving you direction, just follow the directions. And if you have a grievance, grieve it the next day.
But just follow through for right now.
Just follow the directions.
All right. We are out of time.
Wow,
we wish you
fast.
the very best in your new position. And and I know that there'll be all kinds of law enforcement issues and things that come up. And so we will be calling you because you can talk to us on the phone. So there you go. Is Chief.
That's all right. That's
Chief
all right.
Larry Boone, now the new police chief in Urbana, Illinois. Plenty of food for thought over this past hour. If you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and you can download the podcast. And don't forget to sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. Next week on Another View, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby joins me for another view on health, and we're going to be talking about smoking. So tune in. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer. And Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fantastic weekend, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.